I have to do my little selfie here, which I always do whenever I present. Thank you. But it's sparse. I tell you, this projector is way better than this one. You look at the two, and it's all washed out and everything. So seriously, and there will be some detail. I'll be showing a lot of screens, a lot of software. So if I were you, now stay comfortable if you want, but if I were you, I would kind of gravitate this way and a little closer. I'm Alan. This is, you'll see a pattern, J. Allen Baumgarten, J. Allen Baumgarten, J. Allen Baumgarten. Everything in my world is J. Allen Baumgarten, so I'm pretty easy to find. I work for Infosys currently. I work for Sabre. They do software for the airline industry, so heavy-duty enterprise stuff. And travel industry. And then before that, I was with a little ad agency, media agency called Candesa. We did a lot of stuff for the consumer side. We did, for example, entertainment industry. We did stuff for like the Shrek website and Stuart Little and stuff for Hallmark Entertainment. And we did, Park City Ski Resort. Just, a lot of brochureware, a lot of just kind of stuff for consumers. So I've lived both sides of this. But I'm kind of in a hurry because I got a lot of stuff to go through. So let's jump in. The genesis of this presentation started when we got a new CEO, and he started talking at Sabre. He started talking about consumer grade. It kind of came out of the blue. We got to have consumer grade. We got to have everything needs to be consumer grade, and you see it in these tweets. We're very heavily focused on consumer grade experience for our analytic products. It's all about mobile first. And I was like, I know these people are smart, but they have no idea what they're talking about. They're not that smart. So where did this come from? Where, and what exactly does it mean? And at one point during a big meeting, a person on the UX team asked, what exactly do you mean by that, Tom? What do you mean by consumer grade? And he kind of stopped it. Well, it's obvious, right? I mean, it's better. It's consumer. And he just fumbled. He totally fumbled his answer. And I felt bad for him, and so I wrote him these 4 talking points. And I said, anybody ever ask you what it means again? Here, tell them this. And he was going, oh, this is great stuff. Thanks. But I was kind of curious, where did that all come from? And so basically this presentation is around those 4 talking points and with illustrations. I thought, where did this actually come from? Where did he pick this up? And I searched around, and as near as I could tell, if not the origin, consumerization of IT has been talked about since, even 2000. But I think it was SAP that really started using this term, consumer grade. We want to have consumer grade experiences. And as I was looking, I found this blog from internal SAP people, UX people, and they were asking the same question. What do we mean by this? And it was really interesting. And you can Google this. If you Google SAP consumer grade, you'll find this immediately. But as I read the blog, the last person who commented, I think her name was Cynthia, or I'm getting that wrong, but she said something interesting. I'm gonna paraphrase it by giving you this little thought experiment. How many of you like to cook? Okay, in your kitchen, do you want to have a professional grade stove or a consumer grade stove? How many want the professional grade? I'm a foodie. I want, or lawn care. Who wants the professional grade lawnmower versus the consumer grade lawnmower? Why is it that consumer grade suddenly became the really desirable thing in our industry, but in every other industry, it's like, consumer grade. They're cheap, they break, but, whatever. That was really interesting. That was a great insight, which I appreciate hearing. So we're going to explore that. We're going to talk about that. I'm going to burn through these really quick. Let's start with the personas. Everything's about personas. Everything's about that. So let's start, and we're going to talk, man, you can barely see that. Meet consumer software. You can't even see it at the top. Let's talk about consumers, okay? Consumers are all into spending money. And consumer software, a lot of consumer software is for people to shop, for people to spend money. That's what it means, consume. We're consuming products, right? into fitness. Now, I want to stop on the, and a lot of the wearables now, Fitbit and things like that are about, the bioinformatics. It's all about the individual fitness and health and things. This is obviously a metaphor, right? Consumer and professional, right? We're all consumers here. I'm not trying to be some gender bigot saying that only women are consumers. That's ugly. If this is your idea of consumer, then that's fine. And if this is your idea of consumer, that's fine too. Whatever. He's like, yeah. We're all consumers here, and we're all professionals. At least certainly in this group, we're all professionals. So we're both. Okay, so don't read anything into the clip art that I chose to use kind of randomly. Travel was one of the early segments of, at least of the transactional web, is one of the earliest things that you could do. Book travel, book a hotel, book a flight, and there's a lot of things now to help you travel better. Really into games. Games are multi-billion-dollar industry. How many of you have games on your phone? Is that just like everybody? We all have some kind of game or something. News junkies. We've all turned into news addicts from our digital devices. We just love this stuff. We like keeping track of the weather and keeping track of, trends and news and things like that. I'm always doing this. Entertainment, too. I think the iPad really succeeded because it was an entertainment device. More than anything, it was a media device. Social connections, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and we have people from some of those organizations there, and many, many more. We're social, and we like to use these new, a lot of the software is about people keeping together. Finances. When's the last time any of you wrote a paper check? I did fairly recently. It was kind of an unusual situation, but I did, or when's the last time you did your taxes by printing out the paper forms and doing it manually? We just don't do that anymore. There's been a total, or you do it. Okay, one person who likes pain. Things have kind of changed. We manage our finances, our personal finances and things digitally now and online. Opinionated, opinions. Think of sites like TripAdvisor or Yelp, or even in the news, people like to add their own opinions now. It's really ugly. Whoops, I blacked it out. Sharing your opinions is a really big part of social media. This one's kind of hard to explain, the ADHD, and I don't really mean it in a negative term, I guess, but it's assumed that consumers have a very short attention span. And we design, so like the Nest is great because it takes me just like a second to see, what temperature it is and whether it's heating or cooling, and it's great. I love these devices. But a lot of the software has kind of been built with the assumption that you're not going to spend a lot of time looking at it, quick in and out. There are some exceptions like entertainment or games. Looks are everything. Do you kind of assume automatically that consumer software looks better than enterprise software? And it does. It's not an assumption. It really does. There's a real premium on that. Part of it's related to choice. We're going to get back to that topic and talk about that a little bit more. And this is kind of an interesting one, too. They're kind of loners. Consumers are loners, which is to say they don't really collaborate and do things together when using their software. It tends to be isolated circumstances of you doing your thing all by yourself. Shopping, you get online, you find your thing, and you buy it. In the real world, you go out with friends shopping, you go out. But when you're using your software, it's kind of, you tend to be doing your own things. Again, there are exceptions like cooperative gameplay, if some of you like to play Halo or something. But for the most part, that's the case. So we get this profile, this idea of just consumer software in general. It almost lines up with the categories that you see in the App Store, for example, or in the Android store. You have these chunks of kind of applications that you can get. Now let's talk about, and let's meet enterprise software. There's actually, I'm going to stop because there's two types of enterprise software. I'm using that term only because I don't actually like the term. It seems to have been kind of picked up by the industry, and so I'm going along with it for now. But there's really two types. There's the productivity applications. This is what you were trained to do. This is you doing your job. Versus the what I call bureaucracyware. This is the business enablement. That's my own term. If you Google it, you won't find it. I checked. I was like, anybody calling it this? No, just me. Bureaucracyware is all of the stuff, and this is actually a screen capture from my own company, Infosys, and this is only the first third of the page. If I scroll down, there's that many things that you can do to kind of be an employee at this company, which is rather insane. But things like time tracking and expense reports and your HR and your claims and benefits and all the things in an enterprise that go along with just being an employee. Okay, so it's all that kind of stuff. And the difference, and it's a really important difference, because this on the left, this side is where you're making your money. This is where you are generating income or wealth, or doing your, if it's nonprofit, doing your thing, your vision. Whereas on the other side, it's kind of this necessary evil. It's a tax. It's a cost center. In the airline industry, we say whenever the planes are in the air, they're making money. And all the time that they are on the ground, that's all cost. That's all costing the airline money. So you want to reduce that as much as possible and get the planes back up in the air again, But you gotta refuel. There's necessary things you have to do, but you really want to get the planes back in the air. It's the same thing. You don't want to spend a lot of time on the bureaucracyware stuff. You want to hurry that through as much as possible. So you tend to draw more from the consumer playbook when you're doing those kind of things versus your productivity applications. For the most part, I'm talking about the ones on the left, okay, the productivity. So let's meet enterprise, and we'll buzz a little quickly. Into making money. It's all about profit. It's all about what you're doing to generate revenue. Really into work, long hours in some cases. The persona here, highly educated, highly trained. In many cases, master's degree, PhD, or it's not unusual in my fields to see people who have been doing what they're doing for 20 years. Many people here have been highly trained in UX and are well-trained professionals. Perfectionists. With professional software, with professional applications, it's so important to be accurate, to be absolutely right. And the consequence for being wrong can be in the millions of dollars. Imagine getting the fuel wrong on a flight. I mean, it's just really terrible consequences to that happening. And therefore, high risk and high stakes. You don't want your laser eye surgery to go bad. That's a really, important thing to get exactly right. Deep dive problem solving. We heard a little bit about this already today. They love the information, the underlying information. Don't give me any summaries. Give me the data. Give me the meat of it, and let me understand what's really going on. There are a lot of rules and regulations and policies. Anyone who's doing medical, anybody in medical industry, of course, HIPAA requirements, or financial, working in the banking industry, there's so many regulations. FAA, you can't have a minimum viable product that only meets the top 5 regulations. You just can't. It's got to meet every single one, or else you have nothing. You can't be used. Whoops. There's a huge appetite for information, kind of going back to the deep dive problem solving. And they can tolerate it. I sat in and watched a flight planner once who had 4 big monitors on his desk. And what he kept repeating over and over to me is, I need to see more. You're getting information from all kinds of sources, weather and aircraft maintenance and stuff. And he would just say, man, you got to give me more. And I was amazed by that, but it's true. That's the area. Efficient multitasker. You tend to do, with consumer, you tend to do just one thing at a time. Versus in professional context, you could have a lot of things that you're juggling all at once. Not necessarily at the same time, but going back and forth quickly. Check email, answer this thing, do my work some more, see what else is going on, And you have to design for that, and the software allows for that. Legendary attention span, as opposed to the consumers. You can see a guy in the tower for 8-10 hours a day. His head's on a swivel. He's totally focused on what he's doing and paying really, really close attention the whole time. Appearance, not so important. Industrial, doesn't matter. Collaboration. As opposed to working more alone like the consumers, professionals almost always work together. Again, there are some exceptions, but usually, like if you're an animator at Pixar, you got to do your one thing, but it's got to seam in with everybody else doing their one thing, and collaboratively you create this great, end product. So there we have these two kind of personas or archetypes of the consumer and the enterprise. They're not exactly the same. There are a lot of differences between them. But yet we get back to this point that SAP, the decision makers are saying, we've got to get these two together. We got to get us some of that consumer grade. And SAP is not the only one. Philips, fresh user interfaces are seen as a key to us beating Oracle and SAP. It's now thought of as a strategic advantage. Oracle is saying, yeah, we're going to beat the company. They're all saying they're going to beat each other by having better user interfaces. That's consumer grade stuff. But but still the two are kind of looming there. We have nothing in common. Here, let me underscore that with this. How many have read Emotional Design? Donald Norman, right? Who essentially said, beautiful things work better. And I think that's I don't know, you kind of are, maybe not. His point was that if you have this emotional attachment to something, that you can use it better, and he goes through very carefully, makes that. So there's this cool citrus juicer that he absolutely loves, it's so beautiful and elegant, and he doesn't even use it for juicing. He leaves it on his mantle because it's so cool. And that's all well and fine to have that, but if you need to juice 41 million boxes of citrus in a year, and you need to meet very strict food purity guidelines, and you need to have a shelf life of 72 hours, and this thing starts to become completely irrelevant. It's almost, you can't even talk about it in the same context. Here's another example. I love this example. These are both Toyota Camrys. One Toyota Camry is the consumer version, and the other one is from NASCAR. Look how different those are. Very different. The steering wheel comes off. Why does the steering wheel come off? Well, because there's no door, so they have to crawl out. So they have to be able to take the steering wheel out to be able to crawl out the window. That's not consumer friendly. Well, yeah, but it's kind of necessary when you're doing NASCAR. Nothing in the bottom here is flammable. You don't want your car to become a barbecue if something bad happens. In fact, you're protected by these big, huge gloves and bodysuit and everything. And that's why you have big toggle switches for doing certain functions instead of the nice, elegant screens. There's all reasons for this. Can you guess which one of those dials is a speedometer? There is no speedometer. It doesn't matter how fast you're going. You want to go faster than the other guy. That's the only thing that matters. In fact, it's a tachometer. But you can see your bias about consumer cars has already biased you. If you were asked to go in and design software, or design a cab for NASCAR, think of how many mistakes you would make, because you're just thinking in that mindset, when they're completely different. And so I kind of go back to that question of, what do we have in common between these two? Is there anything at all? And there are some commonalities. If you get it wrong, and here's an example of getting it wrong, the consequences can be really disastrous. This is from my friend Ben Judy, who he still works at Intuit. And he said that they started he works in professional tax software. So this is the software that not the consumers doing TurboTax, but all the professionals doing their taxes for others or for companies' business. And they wanted to have a mobile version. Why did they want a mobile? Because mobile first, right? No other reason. We got to get us some of that consumer grade UX. And so they started designing, and they had it pretty much built, all the way built, Look at these long forms. Just scroll down and go through the form, and it's all really easy and super easy to do and all of that. Fortunately, saner heads prevailed, and this product never made it to market. Why? Goes back to the persona. These guys are lightning fast on the 10 key. You can't even see their fingers move. If you ever watched an accountant work, and their income is tied to productivity. If you slow me down by a third, you've given me a a 30% pay cut. I'm not going to use your stupid little app that's going to cost me that much money. I'm going to keep doing things the way that I'm doing. They didn't take the form factor into account. They thought, well, it'd be cool. Of course they want a mobile app. I don't know why they thought that. They didn't do their research. They eventually did do this little mobile app where you could communicate with clients, but even then, clients don't want to always be in contact with their accountant. They want to say, here's my stuff, do my taxes, goodbye. So even that was kind of mixed results. So where are the places where we shouldn't have things in common, and where are the things where we can say, that there's some commonality? We're going to do some relationship counseling for them. You know how relationship counseling is. You go into a room and you say, let's talk openly and honestly about how you feel. And usually they get really ugly, So here we go with Enterprise starts off. She's a ditz. She's so stupid. Hurtful word. Why would you say such a hurtful thing? Well, here's an example. I was looking through this list of websites. I do this every now and again. One of these is like 25 best websites. You see this all the time. And I looked at the bottom and I thought, what is this? Tell us what snacks you enjoy. We'll put them in a box for you and send them to you. I thought, what user research did they do that concluded that the average user had a second-grade education? Right? Because if I were designing something for second graders, it's exactly the kind of words and the kind of pictures and that I would do. And then I kind of dumbed down here. And I thought this was maybe an isolated incident. No, not at all. I found a whole bunch like this, exact same thing. Do we really need to boil it down that much? Here's one for the IRS. There. I've completely simplified taxes. Great. No deductions. Super easy. Imagine a doctor, find out what hurts, cut it out, staple them up. It's just not right for the professional audience. I thought maybe it came from Steve Krug, his book, which many of you I'm sure have read, Don't Make Me Think. But I reviewed it, and he really wasn't talking about dumbing things down. What he was talking about was things like this. This is from my own expense report tool. And look here at the bottom. So it asks for remarks. And so I made the remarks. And then I have two options, withdraw or cancel. I'm not making this up. I didn't Photoshop this. And I was like, what do I do? What will happen? I was kind of nervous, right? I don't want to withdraw it. I don't really want to cancel. See what I mean? So we inflict a lot of torture on people when we don't do our job right. A little better example now. This is, from an application I did for pilots. And so they basically have their flight plan. And although you don't necessarily know, the casual user doesn't know what zero fuel weight is or takeoff weight or all these things, the pilots do. They speak this language. And they know exactly what they're looking at. And it's put together in such a way that they can access it really quickly, that they're familiar with it. You don't need to know about this application. You can just go, okay, I'm seeing things that I know and I'm familiar with. So we don't need to dumb things down. Just speak to the level of the audience for professionals. So here's number one. Consumer grade. So let's agree. Let's get the couple to agree. Consumer grade is not consumer-like. Professionals different from consumers in significant ways, but everyone deserves to have a positive experience. Delight is universal. Can we agree that that's a good thing regardless of where you are? Just hit it to the right target, though. Okay, let's keep going a little bit faster. He's a slob. And you know what? Enterprise is just going to have to take that. How many of you have just seen some just bodaciously wicked, awful designs? And it's true. Although, in fairness, let's be fair. Let's be fair for a couple of minutes. If you go back in time, some of these websites that we now look to as being, the great examples of design weren't necessarily, the best of breed. Probably good for the time. There's Facebook. That's the one that really surprises me. You remember Google? We always look at, Google is so elegant and minimalist. And, well, okay, not always. The thing is, that the web kind of had in its DNA advertising. It really started out with a lot of that, kind of this advertising stuff. And so you got advertising graphic artists going in and working on stuff. That's what I did for the first chunk of my career. And the developers, on the enterprise side, you didn't really have UX until much later. They started going, oh, UX, that's kind of a good thing to have. Design, that's kind of a good thing to have. And so design was kind of done by developers. Well, if the developers are looking at tools like this to code, if they need an interaction pattern, what are they going to do? They're going to take what they're already seeing and what they're already familiar with and just replicate it, right? It's kind of this self-reinforcing thing of bad interaction. But they're used to it, but they're professionals. And also, the design was kind of built into a lot of the frameworks, a lot of the motif, You don't choose the design. It's just already chosen. You just say, here's a field, here's a button, put it there. And lately, that's kind of changed. Lately, with things like Java, FX, and MCF and whatever, that's changing. And so we can decouple the design. I love this. I found this in a blog once. A bridge that will never inspire an artist or poet. But it meets a lot of, the necessary qualifications of a bridge. It's concrete, it holds cars up, it doesn't get washed away when there's a big flood, it does its job. How many times have you driven over bridges like that and not even thought about it? They do their job. Well, this one does exactly the same thing. It's made of concrete, it doesn't get washed away, it does all these things. And yet there's something about it that is beautiful and desirable and inspiring and memorable. And I've actually driven down just to drive across that bridge. It's that cool. It's the Trinity Bridge in Dallas. And you'll think of some other examples locally. So even with something like tables aren't evil. It's a good way to present data, and professionals know what to do with a table. But we don't need to necessarily make them, old industrial. We can clean them up a little bit. Okay, we can apply some design aesthetics. So let's agree. Consumer grade is contemporary. I'm not going to use modern, contemporary. The user interfaces look new and modern and elegant. Styles are updated regularly. Don't just do it once and leave it for 10 years. It's going to be out of style. Keep it updated. Plan on that. Plan on updating your style guide. All right, next one. She can't make up her mind. This is the retention curve for Android apps. And you see people will put apps on their phone and then not even 24 hours later, that sucks. I'm going to get rid of that. Consumers do this a lot. They do it at the gym too. 80% of consumers who joined the gym in 2012 didn't go after the next 5 months, You like the idea of it, and so you go, and then I don't really like it, and stop going. Change that to a professional context. Do you think the Army guys stop going to the gym? No, because it's their job to stay fit, and they have to be able to do what they're doing. They don't really have that element of choice. You can choose all kind of weather apps, but if you want to get paid back, this is the expense report your company has, you're going to use it, no matter how bad it is, That doesn't excuse the badness. I'm just saying that there's an element here of choice. And what drives choice? When we talk about consumer-grade UX, what is it what's that element, what's that thing that makes it desirable or that makes it so that you would want to choose it? We have choices. As a UX, we're lucky. We have all kinds of different prototyping tools that we can choose from, and they're all really wonderful. I found this quote from Wired magazine back in 2013. I thought this was very prophetic, very nice. I'll go ahead and read it. We're entering a new era, one in which designers create experiences centering not on physical objects, but on the fabric of digital information that surrounds us. That's the next great challenge for us. And this is a few years ago. To design, weaving the threads of technology, information, and access seamlessly and elegantly into our everyday lives. I like that idea of being a weaver of information, as far as experiences. Teresa, in her workshop, talked about ambient information. We can certainly get a lot of ambient information from our devices, about motion and location, proximity, and things like that. But there's more to this, I think. Think about really great experiences. Think about, if you go to Hollywood and want your hair done, you pay $500, you go into a salon, here's my $500. They'll look at your face and go, I know the right cut for you. And they will give it to you. You go to Great Clips and pay $15, they say, how do you want your hair cut? And you tell them, and then they do exactly what you do. You know, there's a level of difference there, you know, of this I know, and I'm going to serve you, versus tell me what you want and I'll just do it. You know, you don't tell the tailor, make my sleeves this long. He knows. He'll measure. He'll figure it out. You know, he will serve you in that way. You don't tell the chauffeur, bring an umbrella. It's raining outside. He knows. You know, and the wine. You know, here's the recommendation of the wine. This will go well with what you've ordered. So we like this. These are experiences that you would choose. You know, this is not an experience that I would choose. I went into I got a new doctor, and I went in, and they had these forms, these big, long paper-based forms, and I was like, I was getting angry and angrier by the minute. Doesn't this information exist somewhere? Doesn't my insurer know it? Doesn't my last doctor know it? Why are you asking me this stuff? Why am I having to do this? And every new doctor would say, well, and I asked, why do you? Well, it's just required. You just have to do it. Not a good experience. There's this company, IFS, they do enterprise software, and they rolled out this whole big line of mobile. And I want you to look at one in particular. I got a video of it, a marketing video, of this mobile expense tool. So let me hit that. I think we're going to cue the mic so you can hear it.
IFS Trip Tracker enables you to take care of travel expenses reporting on the fly. Just push new trip, enter the purpose of the trip, and you also have the option to enter project number 2. The intuitive overview of the main menu guides you through the process, so it's easy to register your complete travel expenses. Let's begin with reporting your mileage. Enter route information and the distance travelled, and push to save. The total amount is displayed on the main menu.
Nice, it can
Next,
calculate.
add your receipts. Enter reference information for each receipt, choose the appropriate expense code, select the right currency, and gather the amount.
All right.
Now here's the really clever part.
Clever.
Click on the camera icon and take a photo of the receipt.
Whee!
Let's add another receipt to the travel expense. This time, the costs of taking a train journey from Frankfurt to Fulda.
They're cheating because they've
Change
done a whole
currency
bunch in advance.
and enter the amount. If there are no more costs to be added, then we go back to the main menu again.
I'll just skip because, did you pick that up? It all sounds great in the marketing, but if you really listen, it's really easy. Just do this and enter this and click this and select this and then do this and then hit this button. And I'm like, you know, select the currency. Don't you know where I am? You know, you can't even figure that. So I came up, I did these sketches. This only took me about 15 minutes. It's not hard to think through better experiences, you know. If things are connected, really connected. Oh, I see that you just booked a trip to Munich. How do I know that? Well, because I have this corporate booking site that I have to go to. As soon as it registers, oh, this guy's going to Munich for these dates. All right, I just created an expense report for you. Now, I can say, no, I appreciate you thinking of me that way, but no, this is personal travel. Or, no, that sounds good. It's even suggested a name for it, you know. And then later, when I'm in Munich and I use my card whenever, you swipe my card and it's about breakfast time in Munich, and it's the first expense of the day, and it thinks, oh, that was probably, and it came from a restaurant, it was probably breakfast. I'll go ahead and add this to your expense report. Oh, thank you very much. That was really nice of you, you know. And then later, oh, you just did an expense, and for that we're going to need a copy of the receipt. Do you mind just taking a picture now? I can say, yeah, I'll do it later, but gosh, yeah, there, great. So this expense report is like this little accountant following me around, you know, doing all of these things for me as I go. And at the end of this whole thing, my expense report is all done because it's just kept track all along, automatically. Not hard. You just have to take the time to actually do it. Here's a real-world example that I love. We looked at this. This is FieldViews. They're in the Bay Area, and that's an application for farmers. And if you can tell it where your farm is, They can tell you how much rain fell in that specific area and how much nitrogen you probably are going to need for the soil, based on that and stuff like that. And a lot of good information. Tell me what you're growing, and I'll tell you a whole bunch of more stuff about how to manage that acreage. Even how dense, to do the seeds. I mean, a lot of great information. But first you have to tell me where your farm is. So when you open this up, this is just a free one. You should get this and try it out. So you open the up and you sign in. And then it shows you on the map where you are. It's assuming that you're kind of near your farm, but if not, you can move around and find it. But they took all of the survey information that was already, all the land survey information, and they drew little lines around all the plots of land. See the green lines right here? So all you have to do is tap it, and then it kind of selects that. And then it tells you how much acreage, how much area you have there. So easy. Can you imagine how they could have botched it, how they could have really screwed it up? Enter the GPS location every 10 feet all around your entire property. And the guy's typing in all these numbers, When we think about information systems, they're these they have an insatiable appetite for data. And if we do it wrong, we expect people to just enter in all of this data, to be data entry. That's why the genius of Amazon with one-click shopping, I know all of this stuff. Just tell me if you want it. Okay, I want it. Done. That's the kind of experiences we're talking about. So let's agree, consumer grade implies desirability. Consumers have a choice. When they don't like something, they can abandon it and adopt something else. Professionals aren't so lucky. We often don't have a choice. But the quality of the experience should assume that we do. Would professionals choose this if they even had a choice? That's what we're after. If you work for Pixar, you don't get to choose your animation package. You have to use theirs, right? But would you if you had a choice? Is it that good? Maybe it is. All right, last one. He's totally set in his ways. This is working with a lot of travel agents. They use this green screen, the blue screen we call it, but you type in command lines, the command line system, and you get all kinds of great information back from the mainframe really fast. If you can learn to talk like a computer, you can have great conversations with the computer. But there's that steep learning curve of having to do that. But once I've spent that time and invested that time to learn it, I don't want to have to abandon that speed and convenience. I'm a professional. I know how to work this system. And so as we wanted to evolve this product, we had to make sure to respect that. So we started putting more, I guess, consumer-grade things on the periphery of the experience, where you could see more, have more clicks and things like that. But you still had that, sacred command line space, to do. Same with like F keys and things like that they're familiar with. We just designed in such a way that it sort of incorporated that. This is a software called Dentrix. If you've been to a dentist's office, maybe you recognize it. They have 90% market share, among dentists. And why is that? This skeuomorphism, something that is kind of poo-pooed by designers now. Oh, we can't have it. But look at it. If I'm a dentist, I know exactly what I'm seeing. And if I want to add a procedure, I just click on the tooth and just done a root canal. And I can have these patient plans. Even the mouse is pointed like a little dental scraper. It's kind of funny. But dentists, see, they don't do computers for a living. They do teeth for a living. And so they can immediately look at this and understand what they're seeing and help the patients understand as well. It's a very, very successful product. Here's another example from that pilot's pilot. Now, pilots are used to getting a paper-based flight plan. They print it out right at the gate, take it in with them. But if weather conditions change and they need an extra 1,000 pounds of fuel because of de-icing or something, they have to call up the flight planner and have them change the flight plan around, because they have to if you add 1,000 pounds to a plane, you have to recalculate everything. You've got new takeoff weight, you've got new duration, everything changes. So I have to do a new plan, and then they have to print it out and have some guy run it down to the gate and hand it to the pilot. It's a very bad experience. And so just by making that digital and saying, the pilot can say, oh, yeah, add some more fuel on, and it will automatically send it up to the planner, who can say, yep, this is all good, automatically send it back. That's a great experience for them. The pilots are happy to adopt this because it's a better experience. They're not just saying, well, I don't want anything other than my paper-based flight plan. This is obviously a better thing for them, and it doesn't look very different than what they're already using today. So it was a really nice bridge. So the last one, consumer grade is intuitive. People can easily discover or work out what they need to do to accomplish their goals. Even highly trained professionals should immediately feel comfortable seeing enterprise solutions for the first time. They see elements that align with their knowledge. Roxanne and I had this talk about training last night. Now, how much training should a professional need? If they know their domain, if they know their job, professional tax accountants seeing new software for the first time, it should be immediately obvious to them because they know all this stuff. It should be completely familiar to them, and they should be able to work it out. Now, if you're not a tax professional, you're going to be lost. I have no clue what you're seeing, you know. That's really the thing, is let's align it with the people and what they're doing and what they want to accomplish. So there's the 4. This is where you take out your camera and go click, you know, or you'll get a copy of this anyway. How are we doing on time? I have just enough time to show you one more example of where we can of bringing this all together. And this is something I wrapped up fairly recently, and I'm just showing you the actual mock-ups. It was this thing, Roxanne, I just added this just because we talked about this last night. You wanted to see that, the one for Eurocontrol. So dispatchers have to figure out, whenever there's a constraint in terms of being able to take off, like there's weather, you can say, well, only half of the flights that are scheduled can take off during the next 2 hours, you know, or like 25% or whatever. So the airlines have to figure out which flights they're going to hold or delay or cancel even, you know, so that they can take off what they can. And they want it, and right now it's just done based on the delay time. They want to try to minimize the delay as much as possible. But the idea behind this is if we know which flights are expensive to delay, cost more to delay, then we can choose the less expensive flights and delay those. Pretty simple idea, but it's impossible to do right now. The data for a cost of a delay comes from so many different sources. You really have to get it and pull it together. That's that weaving together of information. So this came from, this isn't what I did, in case you're all horrified. This came from the subject matter expert who was trying to communicate with me, okay, this is what we need. We need some graph, and we need some thing to say what's really expensive and what's not very expensive. So we worked on this, and this is kind of what we came up with. This is optimized for touch. Why? Because in an airline, in a crisis situation, these guys tend to go off into a war room and then think things through. And the crew guy is there, and you know, the flight planning guy is there. And they're all there together working on the problem. We talk about mobility a lot. I think in the enterprise we need to talk more about mobility within the office, being able to take your problem or, you know, space and be wherever you need to be with it. So this is all optimized for touch. And in the graph, so you can see all of the flights that are departing. And this graphic here, we had great talk about infographics, is kind of, it's not really apparent what you're seeing at first. What happens is that the cost is really light, not very much, then it's a really light blue. And if the cost is really expensive, then it's a really dark. Now, having said just that, you yourself can look and say, oh, I know which flights I want to delay and which I don't, right? That was fast, you know? You can do something that it takes, you know, years and years of training to do, and it's just that fast. I can tell, boy, this flight, I don't want to touch that flight at all. I want it to go on time. And this flight, not a big deal. I can delay it 2 hours, and it costs me hardly nothing. But they don't have the visibility to do that. There's a simple filter up here I'm borrowing from conventions like email, adding an email thing. So if I want to say, well, let's filter by flight prefix, Air France, then I can just filter by those. And if I don't want that filter anymore, I can delete it, just like deleting an email. So using conventions that are common to them. So when a delay happens, you know, we let them know there's this big red thing. Oh, we got this delay. And this is coming from Eurocontrol. All of these flights are now going to have these new times. And so you can see that this 10-minute delay corresponds with $345. Now you can get the actual meat. Now you can get the actual data and see what that's going to be. There's two ways to be able to communicate with the air traffic control and say, well, I want to protect this one and not so much this one. One way is that you can go in and say, oh, this is my number one, and I don't care. I can't remember what that was. I don't care so much about that one. I don't care so much about that one. I really don't care about that one, but maybe this is more important, etc. And then I can send that back. That will go to Eurocontrol. They'll rethink what they were doing and then come back with your solution. And before it was $27,000. Now it's only $5,000 of delay costs. So that fast, we've saved 20 grand. That's a wonderful thing. You know, do that enough times during enough snowstorms, and you've saved millions of dollars for your airline just by making better decisions. You know, you'll see other kind of familiar consumer things like tile-based design. Why? Because if they turn the thing sideways, we want to be able to stretch it out. Tables are inherently problematic, you know, for responsive implementation, I should say. Correcting myself. So that's just an example of taking those 4 principles and still keeping it tuned for a professional audience, but still providing a delightful, desirable experience that really helps them do their job better without really going too far into the consumer side of simplification and you know, working in isolation is very collaborative, etc. So, have we solved everything with this? Let me go back. No, but at least they're looking at each other. I hope that we as an industry can talk about this more. This is my line in the sand, but let's hear some more conversations about this. Let's hear some more discussions about this. And I thank you. There's photo references for all the different photos that I was using. But I thank you. I'll take a couple of questions right now. Or none at all. Okay.
I have a question about interaction patterns that might work in an enterprise when you have an incredibly long form. You showed that doctor's office form.
Yeah.
Oh, God, that looks like our stuff. So clearly the people that are using our product know what they're doing. They've got the subject matter domain, they've got the expertise and stuff, but it's still painful to make them configure all of this stuff. So consumerization is something that we keep hearing.
Yeah.
Let's make this nicer to use. So where's the line when you're doing like a wants and needs analysis, interviews or whatever? How can you apprehend enabling your users to complete their tasks, which is really all they need to do?
Yeah.
So how do you get delight into into a horrible, long, rolling, click here, configure this, blah, blah.
How do you make long forms delightful? I'm going to summarize her question. How do you make long forms delightful? Sometimes you don't. You know, sometimes it's this is your job. You know, we need this much information. Are you supporting keyboard optimization? You know, as best you can, so that at least they can move through it. Are you using, you know, intelligent defaults? Can you reduce? But getting back to that threading the information, is there any way that you can reduce half of that form and get it from other sources? Is it really necessary to put in every single one of those? Now, in the case of you know, I'll go back to Flight Planner. Sorry, it's what I know. There's a lot of information that is needed, you know, about a particular flight plan you're putting together. We derive as much as we can from various sources. We know the flight schedule, we know the aircraft, we know its capabilities and things like that. So we can populate a lot of that data, but some of it we just, you know, they need to put in. It's okay, it's what they do for a living. It's their job, you know. And so they won't hate you for having these big, long forms. I actually think, and testing would prove this out, that a long scrolling form is still preferable to trying to page it, you know, and going to multiple pages and skipping back and forth. As long as it's a nice, clear progression, you know, moving through the form. Other things that would just be annoyances are things like form field validation that's overly aggressive, you know, rely on the professionals to know their stuff and know to complete it. But my first stage in trying to make it a better experience, a more desirable experience, would be to see if there's any way at all that I can simplify that form, just to alleviate all the busy work. And maybe you can't, but then they know their job. They know what they're doing, and they'll understand that. Consumers, maybe not so much, but professionals will. Please.
So you mentioned early on, like, the training and the attention span kind of issues. And
Yeah.
The first thing that came to mind was, and again, you mentioned, I think in your video, the intuitive word, right? One of my favorites to hate.
It's so intuitive.
But if it's self-explanatory,
Yeah.
kind of thing, right? So, but that seemed to me to be a fundamental difference between at least the typical perception of consumers is they're not willing to invest in having to learn, having to train. It should be something they can figure out on their own and be self-explanatory. Yet,
Yeah.
in enterprise, there's, at least typically reasonably, some expectation that training is okay.
Yeah, the tolerant. Yeah. So the question is it okay to have any training at all? Is that fair to summarize what you're saying, or what is that tolerance level? How many of you trained on Photoshop? Did you hate it? Did you just hate every minute of it? No, it's my job. Or Acture. It took me a while to learn and pick it up. Professionals understand that they need that there's this kind of onboarding. Now, if I already know design and I know other design tools, if I step from Photoshop into some other competing thing, should I be able to kind of recognize the tools, the various drawing tools or the various layering tools or other kind of things? Yeah, probably. And so my learning curve should be a lot less, demanding for those kind of things. But to the extent possible, I think that we can do a better job of like onboarding. And that's something we can learn from consumers. The first time I use a professional app, if it kind of goes through with some little bubble tips and says, here's where you'll find this, and here's where you'll find this. And I can say, okay, got it, thanks. Now I've done this, I've really reduced the requirement of training. I wish they had that for my expense report tool, which is just mind-bogglingly crazily bad. To say, here's where you do this and here's where you find this. Better to make it intuitive, but if a little bit of familiarization is necessary, then that's okay. I hope I kind of answered your question. But there is a much higher tolerance for training. Pilots train. They know that they're going to train. They have to keep on going in for training, and it's just part of their job. They get paid for it, and so there's a higher tolerance for it. Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify, because you showed the difference between the consumer-grade product for, getting a snack, and then, and I don't think you were dissing plain language.
I'm not at all. Again, it really is about the domain knowledge. So the question is, maybe I didn't. Let me let you finish your question, and then I'll respond.
I guess it was more an observation, because one of the things we've been looking at is even in a professional's domain, they're so time crunched, right, to do all the tasks they have to do. So one of the things we advocate for is this is not where you're going to write a dense paragraph to get them to do a step. And even your sketches, I noticed it was nice, clean copy, or short, it was easily
Yeah.
digestible. So there's a fine line between the precision of language that you have to have, so you're not almost dissing your user, because you want to use the words they use.
Yeah.
But at the same time, be mindful of the fact that they don't have a lot of time to digest all your content.
That's true. So her comment, and I'm repeating in part for just the recording, her comment was that professionals, even speaking their language, economy of language is still a desirable thing, I think is what you're saying. It's still worth not overburdening them with a lot of text, a lot of copy. That simplicity still works for professionals, and I don't disagree at all. I think the extent to which you can simplify things is wonderful. However, professionals, in my experience, have a much higher tolerance for data density than consumers. If I look at a day trader screen, I spent some time watching day traders, and it's just phenomenal, the stuff that they will see, and be able to look at, and they know exactly where on the screen they need to look. And so I can derive from that I can go really heavy on the data density and the jargon and the acronyms, which I normally would avoid if it's part of the common vernacular. That I don't need to let that be an artificial constraint to the consumer grade side. I can go ahead and speak their language and and let them get right into the meat of what they do and be as dense as I need to with that. So that's a great observation. And one of those really key differentiating points, what's that sweet spot? That's what user testing will help you determine. One more here.
I just have a comment. I'm a consultant, and I design a lot of enterprise solutions. I hear a lot about consumer grade.
Yeah.
What happens a lot is that an executive says, I want this to work just like the Windermere website, right? And what is hard to convey is that that is designed for very occasional use.
Yeah.
So somebody coming in just a handful of times or maybe one time, where the application I was tasked to design was somebody all day, every day, doing a task, and even small things in efficiency make a big difference.
Magnify, absolutely.
But it was really hard to convey that because she wanted, all these little, fuzzy controls because it was what she had seen, in the consumer space.
Yeah.
And, it was a battle that unfortunately was lost. And, it was difficult.
So you're living that hell, that consumer grade being the enemy of a good experience, that assumption that, well, and I hear it phrased as people have these expectations from their devices, that if I have a really easy thing to do on a mobile device, that I'll have the same kind of ease of doing it, in a professional context, and they just assume that. I don't know why they assume that. But that is to the very heart of what we're talking about. Data, research data can help to diffuse that if you have it, to be able to say, actually, presenting two different options to professionals, they really don't prefer this. They want a little bit more, we're going to lose those battles unless we have a little bit more meat, I think, and ammunition to go in. And hopefully this is at least the start of having some, prepared and available. Even just saying consumer grade isn't consumer like, which is a great talking point. Thank you all very much for attending. I really appreciate you being here.